Our next story is about two truths. One, our planet is careening towards a climate catastrophe. And two, our governments are not doing enough to prevent this crisis. But all hope is not lost. Thanks to an acronym, the much-awaited COP28, the most important climate conference of the year. This is an annual international climate summit convened by the United Nations. And this year, it will be held here in Dubai from November 30th to December 12th. Tens of thousands of people will be attending it, from government officials and business leaders to youth advocates, even leaders of fossil fuel companies. So obviously, we are here too to bring you all the updates. We'll answer all your questions. What does COP28 stand for? Who is attending the conference? What's on the agenda? What are the expectations? But before all of that, let's go back about 30 years. In 1992, more than 150 countries signed a UN treaty. They decided to limit the alarming rise of pollution. In 1995, the parties to that agreement held their first conference. This was the Conference of Parties, or the first COP. Since then, member states convene almost every year to talk about coping with climate change. So far, one conference stands out. The COP21, it was held in 2015. More than 190 countries signed an agreement. We know it as the Paris Agreement. It was to limit global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably 1.5 degrees. Now, this is a threshold beyond which climate change will get severe, and it will be much harder for humans to cope. Spoiler alert, the planet has already warmed by 1.2 degrees Celsius, and this makes the COP28 all the more urgent. You see, the Paris Agreement was a landmark moment, but it did not list out specifics on what countries can do to achieve it. So at COP28, that's the very intention. The expectation is to have ambitious plans. Now, two major things are on the agenda. Fossil fuels are taking center stage. It is likely that nations will agree on a deal aimed at replacing fossil fuels with clean energy, like wind and solar power. The question is, will nations agree to phase out the fuels? If a political agreement does emerge, this would be the most important outcome of the COP28. The second focus will be the Loss and Damage Fund. Last year, rich countries who are responsible for the majority of climate change agreed to create a fund for the poor and vulnerable nations. Months were spent discussing how such a fund should work. A compromise blueprint was drawn up a few weeks ago, but one thing is still missing: the actual funds. The goal is to get the fund up and running by 2024. With time running out, COP28 is expected to lay down the framework. The decision will lie in the hands of world leaders. More than 160 member nations are attending COP28, including the UK, France, Germany, Japan and India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be here, so will King Charles III, and even Pope Francis, the first pontiff to attend a COP. Leaders from major oil-producing countries will be here too, such as Saudi Arabia, Syria, Russia and Iran. So will fossil fuel executives, like the Wall Street heavyweight, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink. But frankly speaking, the list is as much about who's attending as it is about who's missing it. US President Joe Biden and China's President Xi Jinping both will not come to Dubai. These are leaders of the world's top polluting countries, and they won't be present at the biggest climate summit, and that's hardly the only point of controversy right now. The summit is hosted at a different location each year. This year, the UAE is the host country, the world's fifth largest oil producer. Critics call this a conflict of interest. The other side says it's better to co-opt oil producers than villainize them. After all, the whole world uses the oil they produce. Some oil producers have in fact shown some serious commitments to mitigating the risks of climate change. So we can only hope that contentions do not undermine these negotiations and countries start making good on their plans to curb global warming. With COP28 coming up, the stage is practically set.